Hey guys, you know, I work retail and I really don't like it. But I do enjoy a good book. This is Shane and welcome back to Unique Arts. Retail makes me depressed, obviously, but I just want to talk a little bit about books. I heard about it from my brother at Liam's Lyceum. He's done a video here on this channel on William Morris, but I'll leave a link to that as well. I don't know who the original guy was that he got it from, but the idea essentially is to get a book for each letter of the alphabet, and I'm going to stretch that a bit. I'll try to go ahead and get started. I did stretch a bit, but I tried to at least make sure not to repeat authors. All of them I owned the book. I preferred it if it was, I had read it. But some of them I haven't, so I'll let you know. What we have to start is Aroha, written by a psychiatrist who realized people are not happy. And this is supposed to be some sort of like wisdom, like Maori maxims, so Maori culture, help you feel more connected to your culture if you are Maori, but also more connected to your heritage, more connected to your environment, and more connected to yourself. It's been interesting. I've not read it all. There's like 52 of them. I'm supposed to like read one and ponder it for a week, and there's one for each week of the year. Really interesting. I kind of got into it because I'm really interested in Maori and like Polynesian culture. B, we have Barnett Newman. This is his selected writings, probably the best thing out there to understand him, because like Gardner, all those art history textbooks kind of get him wrong, to be honest, and you just got to read this to realize that he's so interesting. There are other books out there about him. Rosenberg did one, Thomas Hess did one, more recently Ann Timken and Richard Schiff did one, which was really interesting. But Barnett Newman, one of the abstract expressionists, is kind of my Barnett Newman zip behind me, but I really like Barnett Newman. He's a fantastic character. I would highly recommend anyone looking into him, and maybe I'll make a video on him someday soon too. But for C, we got Cyrano de Bergerac. This is the Easton Press version. It's a play. It's a quick read. It's only around 100 years old or so. It's pretty straightforward. Guy's got a big nose. People make fun of him for it. He kills them. French people, you know. And then for D, this is Dead Souls by Nikolai Gogol. He's Russian. He's kind of considered like the first modern Russian novelist, essentially. He is mentioned a lot by Dostoevsky and Tolstoy. Really interesting. Dead Souls is kind of a satire on Russian culture. It's just a dude going around buying up the names of these dead serfs. So he has these people on his name because the census hasn't been updated. So as far as the government's concerned, he's got a lot of property, people. E, so Samuel Beckett is considered like the last modernist. He's part of the theater of the absurd, which is really interesting. There's actually a version of this, Endgame, sorry, that's the E, where the guy that plays Dumbledore is the main character. You can find it on YouTube. He's really kind of odd. If you're really into modernism, if you're really into theater, drama, Samuel Beckett, you need to know him. He's definitely an important character in that regard. For F, I got Frank Capra, Interviews. Capra is a really interesting figure. It's a Wonderful Life. It's probably the most famous movie. Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, all those ones. He won big Grand Slam of the Academy Awards, first one to ever do it in 1934 with It Happened One Night with Clark Gable and Claudette Colbert. He's really interesting, and these collection of interviews go from like the 30s to like the 70s, I think. He died in, I want to say the 90s. It's a Wonderful Life was really his last big film, unless you count State of the Union in 48. He's kind of known for this certain Capricorn aesthetic, which is kind of like the underdog American dude thrown into an extraordinary situation. Kind of nationalistic in a way, but he's really interesting. And then G, I have Gauguin, Paul Gauguin. I really like him. I made a video on him. I find his symbolism, like his stuff that he's most well known for, interesting, but I really like his sculpture. I really like how his aesthetic changes, or he tried to change it as he was trying to become more in touch with his savage, more primitive self and stuff like that. Super interesting. I also chose to study him over other post-impressionists like Seurat because he's more connected to Polynesian culture, as he lived in Tahiti and the Marquesas Islands for the last chunk of his life. Totally a character. His own writings, the writings of a savage as he calls them, is super interesting. He seems pretty aware of himself, but he's an odd guy. For H, I have The Hobbit. It's a classic. I mean, I'm not a huge Tolkien nerd, but I'm a big enough of a Tolkien nerd to say Tolkien, I guess now. The Hobbit, fantastic. I've not read Lord of the Rings. I love the movies, but The Hobbit is a really easy and great read. I mean, you should be acquainted with it. I have The Idiot. I love Fyodor Dostoevsky. He's the reason I read Dead Souls by Gogol. He's phenomenal. That's pretty much all I can say. The Idiot is one of his best novels. Brothers Karamazov is probably my favorite. Crime and Punishment is probably his most famous. Short stories, his novels, you can't really read anything that's bad. If you read his earliest books, like Poor Folk, you might be a little underwhelmed relatively, but still fantastic. Dostoevsky is deservedly one of the best authors of all time. And for J, this is another author. I feel like we're not as acquainted with him anymore. He didn't write much. It's pretty much all he wrote. Really easy to read up on. Metamorphosis is his main thing, but the J, going with The Judgment, it's like 8 pages. It's in here. Kind of really modern, really depressing, kind of existentialist writings, but he's so interesting. I love him. Pretty much The Judgment is a dad getting an argument with his son, and he tells his son to kill himself, and son kills himself. K. Klimt, Gustav Klimt. I've not actually read this book yet. but it's printed by Taschen. Really nice. They do really nice books. But I am really interested in Klimt. He's also turn of the century like Gauguin, but he's more Art Nouveau. I hope to become more interested in. I don't really have that much to say about him. L is Lost Illusions by Honoré de Beausoleil. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but it's about lost illusions. It's about this guy going to Paris trying to make it big, you know. He's from the provinces, and it's really interesting, really well written. Seems like a critique in some way, but it's not like despairing tone or anything. I really enjoy it. Highly recommend it. It's one of those classics that I don't feel like is as well known, but it's certainly worthwhile. So M, I actually did a video on this, The Mayor of Casterbridge by Thomas Hardy. I have not had time to read any more Thomas Hardy. Testy Ubervilles, I think, is his most famous. Really interesting. He's really easy to read, a lot easier than Dickens. He was kind of critiqued for this one because there's too much going on, but either way, because there's so much going on, it kind of keeps you into it for a while. Worth a read. If you can't tell, I enjoy these classic prints from Barnes & Noble, even when my daughter scribbles on them with colored pencils. So this one's a bit different than my other books. This is The Narrow Bridge by Isaac Newman. Not well known. I would be surprised if anyone out there besides like my family knew him, and that's watching these. When I was growing up, my family and I went to a lot of different churches, and we went to synagogue for a couple years. This was our rabbi, Isaac Newman. It's beyond the Holocaust. He doesn't really focus on the depressing aspects so much. It is sad, like he did lose his brother, like his 6 sisters' parents. He pretty much lost everyone, but he focuses more on faith. Really, really interesting. It's kind of hard to, in some degrees, when he talks about like Jewish mysticism. Pretty sure the narrow bridge is from a quote by some rabbi where he's like, life is but a narrow bridge and all we need to do is not be afraid. Really interesting. Definitely worth a read. So O, easy choice here would be just go with the Odyssey. Everyone knows the Odyssey already, so I thought I'd get a little bit different. Orestia is a trilogy by Aeschylus. Might be saying that wrong too. It's a trilogy. Agamemnon's the first part. Really interesting. He's probably most known for Prometheus Bound, but he's easy to read. It's kind of full of intrigue and betrayal and incest, stuff like that, which is pretty normal in Greek tragedy, but still definitely worth a read and really quick. I think a lot of plays are really quick, but especially these old Greek ones, I feel like they pretty much fly by. And then P, we have a classic that I'm sure all of you have heard of, Pride and Prejudice. Jane Austen is great. I don't think she's as interesting as like Dostoevsky. It kind of seems repetitive almost, you know, upper class women, love interests. That besides though, Pride and Prejudice is a great book. Simply put, it's a great book. My one warning is don't read it first if you're gonna read her books, because the other ones won't be as enjoyable after that. But Pride and Prejudice, Jane Austen, definitely worthwhile. Q, I definitely bent this here a bit, but Q is The Snow Queen by Hans Christian Andersen. So he did the fairy tales like The Emperor's New Clothes, stuff like that. They're really kind of dark. They're not as happy as you might think. Snow Queen's a bad girl that takes a little boy pretty much, and his friend helped. Hans Christian Andersen he's good. R is also a bit different. The Romantic Manifesto by Ayn Rand. A lot of people have strong opinions by Ayn Rand. Whatever your opinion is, she's really interesting. Talks about pretty much art. She doesn't like modern art, so I disagree with her there. I don't agree with her on many things actually, but she has some good points. She is really logical and she's worth listening to. Sometimes it's annoying. It's almost like she's so smug about how smart she is, which is kind of annoying to be honest sometimes. But generally speaking, a really interesting read that I don't feel like as many people know about, The Romantic Manifesto. S. We have something also a bit different. It's called The Shattered Alliance. So this is a Magic the Gathering book. This is by Jeff Grubb. Great book. It's book 3 in the Ice Age trilogy. If you're already acquainted with Magic the Gathering books, you should probably be fine with this. It's a bit old, from like late 90s, I think. Again, this is kind of my problem with like Pride and Prejudice with Jane Austen. The trilogy is really good. And because it's really good, I know that lots of the fantasy series aren't as high quality as other ones. So I've actually been afraid to read any more Magic books since reading the Ice Age trilogy, and I don't know if I'm ever going to. The hopes I have that it will be anywhere near as good as this are low. So, and I think he wrote D&D books and stuff like that. My brother would know that. Shattered Alliance, which is book 3 of the Ice Age cycle. Really good. Worthwhile, definitely. T is Te Maori. Te pretty much just means the, and this is like what helped revive the Maori culture and the Maori Renaissance in 1980s, 1984. They had an exhibition at MoMA. It traveled around the country, went to New Zealand, stuff like that after. But it's awesome. It's super awesome. A lot of information about Maori stuff. Hirini Moko Mead on like Maori visual culture. Probably the best one if you ask me. It's great, honestly. We have another Russian, and he's a playwright. I think he wrote some short stories like Ward Number 6 and whatnot. I've not gotten to reading those yet. Anton Chekhov, Uncle Vanya is the one I got for you. It's an interesting play, and there are, theatrical adaptations. Chekhov is a really famous Russian dramatist. Definitely worth looking into if you're into stuff like that. He's kind of realism mingled with modernism in a way, so Chekhov is great. And then V, I've not read this one. I didn't have any V's that I'd read actually, but this is Varieties of Religious Experience by William James. So this is nonfiction. One of the more famous old books on nonfiction. He kind of talks about psychology, but talks about about religious phenomena such as conversion, repentance, mysticism, saintliness, psychic energy that arises from the unconscious mind in times of trouble. To support his theories, he uses writings from Martin Luther, Walt Whitman, Voltaire, Tolstoy, Emerson, stuff like that. He's the one apparently that coined such things as the divided self, healthy mindedness, and like the sick soul, stuff like that. Seems pretty interesting. If anyone has read it, let me know what you think. W, this is my Brandon Sanderson book. Again, like you can tell, I don't spend a lot of time reading fantasy and stuff like that. I just don't have the time and it's not my priorities so much. I like Brandon Sanderson a lot. I'm not caught up with the Stormlight Archive, but I wanted to make sure Warbreaker was in this because this is my favorite Brandon Sanderson book. It's so good, so enjoyable, like 600 pages, really quick though. Sanderson's a great writer. If you're acquainted with him, then you'll know that. If you're not, Warbreaker is a great book to read. X, leave me alone about this. I didn't have anything, so great X. Expectations by Charles Dickens. I like Dickens. I've really read A Tale of Two Cities. I haven't read this one. It's supposed to be really good. That's good enough. For Y, again, I'm pushing it, but there's a story in here, I'll take my word for it, I guess, called The Leopard Yarn, a collection of New Zealand short stories. It's about a kid pretty much where his grandpa, he's kind of old and going to hunt a leopard, and he goes looking for his grandpa, and he pretty much comes upon this like hooker's house, and he's looking at her and he's like, babies. That's pretty much what happens, but it's kind of awkward because he's like 12 or 13, so it's kind of like a coming of age thing, but she's like still flirty. Kind of awkward. Really short story, only 10 pages maybe or something like that. I did it again with Thus Spoke Zarathustra, so Z for Zarathustra. This is Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche's interesting. I know he's kind of controversial. A lot of people don't like him. I like him. I think he's interesting. It's pretty much just about a prophet going around preaching some really interesting stuff, so it's worth a read. It's not a very long read anyway. So there's that. If you've read any of those, feel free to let me know. If you have a favorite or one that you were interested in reading, also feel free to let me know. If you say, hey Shane, you like bent the rules too much, then don't let me know. I know that. But I'll see you guys next time. This was something kind of fun. It lasted a little bit long. I hope it was enjoyable enough for you guys. I hope you guys have a good one. I'll see you guys next time.